Hi everyone, welcome to Adobe Live. Woohoo! My name is Sin Lagos. I am your host today, and joining us is Hallease. Hi, Hallease.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to see your project. I know a little bit about it already because I'm an insider. Before we get started, for those of you who haven't already subscribed to our YouTube, please check that out. We have an amazing community, and it's a great place for you to keep up with the live streams and this incredible community on Adobe Live. Hallease, can you let us know a little bit more about yourself and also the project you're going to be working on today?
Definitely. So, hey everyone again, I am Hallease. I am a digital storyteller and video producer. And if you share my screen, you can see my reel that I kind of show everybody. But I'm a digital storyteller and video producer currently based in Texas. I do a variety of things on the internet as a content creator, behind the scenes producing things. I teach a lot. I'm all over the place. I also was a former Adobe creative resident from 2021 to 2022. So today, what I'm going to be showing y'all is how I finalize an episode of my video podcast, the Trying to Be Somebody podcast. And I'm going to get into some of the audio features within Premiere Pro because I'm a weird podcaster. I don't use Audition. I use Premiere.
I think that is actually everyone's kind of comfort zone to use Premiere. So I'm excited to see this. At least it is for me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, don't get me wrong, Audition's really cool. Definitely check it out. But if you're doing like I do, creating a video podcast, you probably feel more comfortable in Premiere Pro. So yeah, I'm just gonna like walk through some of the things I do to finalize an episode of the podcast. And yeah, hopefully it helps.
Yeah, I think it will. I'm already diving into what you have in front of us. Curious, and I'm already guessing what's going to happen here, but let's see.
Yeah, sure. So right now, this podcast episode is actually already live. It features Victor Jackson, aka Mr. Glam Rock, on Instagram. If you follow him, he's a musician. He's what else does he do? Oh my gosh, he does so much. He's a dancer. He is a choreographer. He's done a lot of stuff. He's based in Atlanta, Georgia. And so I had him on the podcast recently to talk about breaking down patterns and not repeating them, patterns that maybe are unhealthy in your
Right.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the way I start off, this is actually the finished podcast episode. And then back here is some content that my patrons can get to have exclusive that isn't in the main episode. But the way I usually edit the podcast is I like to have all of my audio tracks separated. As you can see, sometimes I label them, sometimes I don't, just kind of depends on what I'm feeling. But I also always do a separate intro outside of filming the episode. So here's just kind of where I tee up everything. And let's just like listen to a little bit of it so y'all can just hear what the quality is sounding like. And I just remember watching the episode of them together and thinking, oh my gosh, I like this person. This person is a good human. And I want to be in the sphere of this good human. Fast forward to last year, we both had films in the Bronze Lens Festival in Atlanta, and I finally got to meet him in real life. And y'all, some people you just vibe with. You know what I'm saying? Like some people you
Great.
meet and you're just like, I see you. And so I then go on to talk about Victor even more and how amazing he is before I finally introduce and tee up the official episode, right? Now, the audio in that probably sounds okay, pretty decent. If any audio nerds are listening / watching this live, then you'll probably notice that I'm a little low overall. Like if I play a little bit and we look at our meters here on the side, honest, I really just wanted to share him with y'all. See, we're kind of like maxing out right at negative 15 dB, which isn't terrible, but generally sort of like industry-ish standard, if you will, is I like to have the audio being somewhere in between like -3 and -6 dB, more or less, for finalizing an episode of the podcast. I also sound really low because I recorded this audio specifically, my separate audio, in 32-bit float, which is like something that's super new and on the scene and exciting in the audio sphere right now, because it's essentially like I'm gonna nerd out with you for like 5 seconds
Okay.
and then we'll
Yes.
talk more. But essentially what it is an audio device that has such an epic range of sound that it can pick up that it more or less like is almost impossible to peak the microphone that you plug into this recording device.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool. So it's a really nice way on sets or podcasts, for example. If you're both plugged into a device that can record 32-bit float, the chances of you having to sit there and monitor levels are like, that is not a concern anymore.
So
You
it's
just,
not as necessary.
yeah, you
Cool.
just hit record. So
Oh,
that's
so
why.
ideal.
Yes, exactly. Look up 32-bit float, y'all, if you haven't yet. There's some really cool recorders out there that can do it that actually won't break the bank.
I can imagine there's a huge demand for an easy sort of starting point for so many podcasters that are trying to get into this space, but don't have that kind of like learning curve of education that potentially they're going to learn in this live stream. But it's one of those things where like the machine or the tools that we use help us get through it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because in the past, with podcasts, you have to like, maybe you have an audio engineer that's sitting next to you and kind of monitoring the devices, a little audio producer that's there with you or something, or you're doing it yourself on the fly. This can be having a machine that does 32-bit float can be a really great way for you to just like not have to worry about it. You just have to remember to hit record, obviously.
Amazing.
All right. So the first thing I do when I'm finalizing an episode is I usually go through my content first, the stuff I filmed after the fact for the episode, and I automatically just kind of bump the gain of it up a little bit. And let me zoom in so y'all can see what I did. All I did was just take the middle bar that's usually there, that's the gain, and just bring it up, bring it down. I usually kind of have it sit at like 4.7. Let's see what that looks like. It's not a very exact science, but then let's listen to what we have now. Gonna be Somebody Video Podcast, and then let's mute the music so we can like really focus on our audio, where we interview mostly BIPOC artists with the goal of helping you. All right, so we're getting a little bit higher, pretty good. Now, one thing I like to do when I'm editing audio is I actually like to do my audio effects on an entire track rather than trying to go through and copy paste things to every single thing.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask you that. It already seems trimmed in so many areas, and yeah, how are you going to apply it to everything?
Yeah, so I like to separate everything. You'll notice everything I filmed that's me sitting in my living room, it's all on one track. And then Victor's audio is all on one track. And then the me that was interviewing Victor is all on one track, and then music. So I always like to go to the audio track mixer. And I think a lot of people don't realize that what this is. It's different from the audio clip mixer. They are not the same thing. Audio track mixer is mixing everything on a specific track. Audio clip mixer is only mixing things on the clip. So audio track mixer, and then a lot of people don't notice this little arrow up here at the top. And when you click on it, it shows you all the effects that you can add to that entire track. So my favorite effects to add to my video podcasts are the following. When I click here, all you do is click this little arrow right here. When I click, it gives you a variety of different options to use. And my two favorites when I'm editing the podcast are the Parametric equalizer. And then I'm going to add also the hard limiter, which I always forget where it is because I don't know why I do, but I always forget where it is. Where are you, hard limiter? Where are you? There you are. Hard limiter. So we're going to pick the parametric equalizer first. I'm going to go ahead and just like zoom in. The way I'm zooming in on the keyboard, by the way, is the shortcut is just the plus key. That's how you zoom in. Minus key, zoom out. And I'm going to have my audio selected. Don't need to, but I just feel comfortable doing that. And then I'm going to hit the parametric equalizer. And you'll see it brings up this new box. There's a lot of different presets in this box where you can mess around with different sounds. So let's say, I don't know, let's try something. Old time radio. Let's see what that does to my voice. Tantalizing discussion with Victor.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, so it completely changed how my audio sounds. Also, you can see how some of these are actually based on like different instruments, etc. So I'm not sure what heavy guitar is gonna do to me because, ooh. And welcome back to another episode
Oh,
of the Trying to Be Somebody video
yeah, you can also
podcast.
see in the graph didn't move all that much, so it isn't like a stark contrast from your original.
Exactly. So my favorite to use for this is the vocal enhancer. And you'll see what this does. It does a high pass filter so that it kind of gets rid of certain. How my audio.
Oops, sorry about that.
No worries. But you'll see there's a high pass filter, so it kind of like gets rid of certain frequencies that tend to just like get in the way of audio, especially if it's dialogue or people talking. And it just kind of, for me, it just kind of fills everything out and gives my voice a nice timbre. So let's play a little bit. Always, and welcome back to another episode of the Trying to Be Somebody video podcast, where we interview mostly BIPOC artists with the goal of helping you. It's very faint, but it cleans it up just a little bit, makes it like just a little more crispy, you know what I'm saying? A little more crisp to it. So that's my favorite one to do for just like general vocal enhancer, right? Especially if you're already working with a microphone that's pretty decent.
Do you have recommendations for the type of mics that you would recommend? Like something like this?
Oh yeah, I mean, definitely what you're using. If you're someone, I can actually recommend mics on like every budget level. So if you're someone looking for a mic that's under $100, I would recommend the Zoom H1N. It's usually around $100, if not, maybe with inflation, it might be a little more. But it's a great little microphone that you can just stand right outside of your camera view and record, upload it, use Premiere Pro's synchronize feature to lock in your audio and video. Boom, there you go. If you want to record straight to your computer, you can use this version of Rode's microphone, which is the Rode podcast NTG USB, something like that. It's
something 90. Like that. It's always a lot of acronyms. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like $99 more or less. Again, with inflation now, it might be a little higher.
Yeah.
The mic I'm using in this is like branding for Rode, but there's a lot of great brands out there. This is what I have.
I feel like just to say a fair disclaimer with any mic is always post editing is so vital to just sort of introducing the artistic element of how you want your audio to sound in the same way of how you want your visuals to sound, I imagine. I think that was a common mistake when I first started, that I was like, well, the mic should do it, right? And it's not quite it. You gotta go into your post editing workflow and learn a little bit about audio.
Exactly. And the other thing that I would add to that too is it's all about trying to record the cleanest version that you can. So something that I always remind people when talking about recording audio is remember to turn off your air conditioner and turn off your fridge. Those are two things that we as humans have gotten just used to hearing in the background. And so we learn to zone it out. Like we don't recognize how loud those things are, but they're actually super loud. So the way to turn off your fridge and not forget about it and never turn it back on and then all your food goes bad is to put your keys inside of it. So that way you don't have to, like, you can't leave your apartment or your home without your keys. That's an old production trick. When we would be on set and we're filming in a house and we need to turn off the fridge, everybody puts their keys in it. So that way the fridge gets turned back on by the end of the set day.
At some point. Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, would you say those are, I've always been curious about this. Are those low frequencies or high frequencies? Because because we often, I guess we tone them out potentially because they're low frequencies. So we just like don't hear them anymore. Because if something is high pitch, I hear it all the time. If I hear my dog high pitching, something like that.
So, oh my gosh, I always get them mixed up. But when you look at a microphone, they'll have things on there called high pass. And I forgot what the other was called, but it's like low whatever. And what you need to remember is like it's the opposite of what you think. So if it's a high pass filter, it's letting the higher frequencies pass. Does that make sense?
Got it. Yeah.
But yeah, it's letting the higher frequencies pass over. Y'all on the live, if I'm wrong, tell her that I'm wrong. But
yeah, let us know in the chat.
But that's usually what that means. And so yeah, it's kind of trying to take a best guess of cutting out some of those lower frequencies, like your fridge, like your AC, if you have a fan going, things like that. They tend to be lower frequencies. And then I forgot what the other one's called, but there is another one that kind of kills some of those like higher tinny tangy frequencies as well.
Yeah. And then in your workflow, do you usually focus on those in case you forgot to leave the fridge on? Off?
Yeah. So what I usually do, let's say I did forget to leave the fridge off in this. What I usually actually will do is I'll add a denoise filter into here. And a little goes a long way with denoising. It's a very strong feature that can sometimes make things end up sounding just like really bad. So I turned it on here for my track, right? And I'm gonna play a little bit. Episode of the Trying to Be Somebody video podcast, where we interview mostly BIPOC artists. And it's kind of clipping it a little bit. Thankfully, it's not too bad. Usually when I put it on, it sounds like way worse. Let's turn it on. With the goal of helping you. Today, we are going to have a tantalizing discussion with... Nice. Wow. I actually must have recorded this pretty well, because usually when I put the denoise filter on, it sounds like I sound super muffled. It just takes away so much information that it kind of is a bummer. So usually what I end up doing is I come into the amount right here and I again, usually a little goes a long way. So I usually don't put more than like 8% on this. And again, what it's kind of doing is, oops, sorry. Not now. What it's kind of doing is it's just like removing some of those high frequencies and low frequencies and trying to focus on whatever is in the range of what it considers usually is like normal for most voices. So yeah, just can be really helpful.
That's interesting. And also though that involves presets also, just in case you don't go in there, sort of freestyle. I notice everything has presets.
Oh yeah, there's tons and tons of presets in Premiere. Okay, so the second thing I do for most of my tracks for a podcast is I do a hard limiter. So what a hard limiter is basically it kind of bumps up the gain all the way until it hits a certain dB amount and peaks at a certain dB amount. Peak meaning like it never kind of goes above this amount. And I usually set that to -3 dB. And so our volume is probably gonna go up quite a bit now. Of the Trying to Be Somebody video podcast, where we interview mostly BIPOC artists. Nice. So now we're hearing me a bit more clearly. I'm getting closer to the range I generally want to be for an episode of the podcast. So again, this is like done for this entire track. So let's say I want to keep this gain and I want to do that for everything that's in yellow, everything on my audio one track. What I can do is I can highlight it, hit Command C or Control C on a PC, and then I'm gonna hit the A key, and then I'm gonna hold Shift, and I'm gonna click. And what that does is it now highlights everything on that track from where I clicked. And then I'm gonna right click on that, and I'm gonna hit Paste Attributes.
Oh, that's my favorite. Yes. I do it so often.
Yes. And then I hit volume, as you can see, because that's the only thing that's different about that track. And then I hit OK. And boom. Now, all of the stuff on that track, combined with my parametric equalizer and hard limiter, everything on there now is
applied.
Ready to go.
Beautiful. We like fast workflows.
For sure. Now, in general, though, you'll notice that with Victor, because this is a digital podcast, we use a program called StreamYard to film the podcast because I usually can't film everyone in person. Sometimes we do have to worry about things like there being little pops and noises and things like that in the person's audio in the background. Yeah. And so you'll see we've added just like little keyframes to just kind of get rid of those things wherever they show up. So yeah, my assistant editor, if you will, has gone through and kind of removed some of those things manually.
Oof.
Yes.
Bravo to the assistant editor.
Yes. Shout out to Chris, the assistant editor. Thanks.
A quick note here from Sam, which is interesting. I'm just curious about what you think about this. Do you think like posting video podcasts is like a great way to sort of multitask, like posting on your video content, also doing those podcasts is like almost like a cheat sheet nowadays?
Yes, I do think so. If you, I'm not going to say I'm being a lazy content creator by doing video podcasts, but
We are already so multiplied.
yeah. So I do these pretty often just because it's a way to, I feel it's a low lift, easy way to have people collaborate with you on your channel as well. But then also to easily break into other mediums. So yeah, the
Yeah.
people that listen to the podcast don't necessarily know that I have a YouTube channel. I mean, I talk about it, but they just know me as a podcaster. And it's
Mm,
just like helping you to diversify your reach, but not necessarily needing to diversify the content itself.
the amount of work.
Also, yeah, exactly. And then also for YouTube, the longer a video is, potentially the more amount of income you can make from it, because you get those mid-roll ads. So a
Mm,
podcast episode is about an hour, and in there I can have anywhere from 4 or 5 mid-roll ads. So
perfect.
yeah, I mean, I don't make
Yeah.
much from AdSense, but there you go.
I mean, it's a great way to think about it, to approach it. We already multitask ourselves so much that it makes complete sense to be able to repurpose it where like maybe the creator is winning as opposed to like just working behind the computer. So I think, yeah,
Oh, yeah. Work smarter, not harder, for sure. Every day, all the time. Definitely. Yes. Are
yeah,
there any
Sam
other
agrees,
questions?
by the way, because reusing content wherever possible is always a good idea. Hmm.
Oh, definitely. I don't have the chat. I can't see the chat. So if there's any questions,
No questions yet, but definitely we welcome questions about audio or about podcasting, about Hallease. I think just in general, I think it's such a interesting topic because most of us don't really see enough. It's not really eye candy, right? It's like audio candy. So we don't see enough about that. I've been diving deep into it because I'm just curious. So I was just so intrigued to be part of this, I guess, class, so to speak, with you. Yeah, so far, no questions, but oh, I have a question from YouTube. Do these shortcuts work in Audition as well? So we have an Audition fan.
okay. Yes, ish. It's been a while
Ish.
since I
Okay.
popped into Audition. But in general, between Audition and Premiere, most of these shortcuts cross over between both in general.
Mm,
Um, the one
with
thing
some
about
exceptions.
yeah, with some exceptions that I can't think of off the top of my head.
Gotcha.
One thing about Audition that I do love, though, compared to Premiere, is with audio, anytime you take a piece of audio and you just start scooting it over in Audition, it automatically creates a crossfade between the two, which I just think is like such a neat little
Such a
trick that,
smart, yeah.
yeah, that is such an audio, specific thing, because crossfades, audio in general, it's all about crossfades, right? So yeah, but Premiere doesn't do that. The way I would, part of my final steps with finalizing a podcast in Premiere is highlighting the entire thing, like all of the dialogue, all of the audio. You can
Mm,
already see them deep, deep in there, but hitting Shift Command D, or what is it on PCs? Shift Control
Control
Alt
D.
D. Okay,
Control Alt D. Ooh.
maybe. Oh, I don't know. But what that does is it adds crossfades to everything you've highlighted.
Mm,
So that is one of the final steps for a video podcast. And you can see I already have them there, these little crossfades that are already there, little constant gain fades.
constant gains.
Yeah,
And that you
and
made that your default crossfade
yeah.
basically for audio. Okay.
Yeah, and again for a Mac it's Shift Control D or Shift Command D. And so if on a PC it's probably Shift Control D, I
Control
think.
D. Yeah, they often are where just switch around the control. But
But
yeah, I
yeah.
knew about Command D, which is like you go individually and place that transition. But to be able to select everything, that's really helpful. Hmm.
Yeah. And that's always just going to be a nice solid last step for I think any Honestly, like most videos as well, like a traditional YouTube video content you're creating in general, Shift Command D, Shift Control D, that's like the thing I do like to finish out a piece of content for sure.
That's the last step that you would take.
Yeah, super duper last step. Like, all right, just in case, let Shift Command D, Shift Control D.
Yeah, so everything sounds more consistent and smooth. There isn't like weird, like sort of stark contrast between each clips. I guess it's almost like applying the same approach that you would to visual, but in audio format, which is so interesting. Kind of just coincides in the same way.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a lot of the stuff does kind of like cross over when you think about it. I mean, obviously you wouldn't do like you wouldn't do necessarily a transition on video like that all the time, like apply default transition, because then it just I don't know, with all the type of
yeah.
yeah.
In the spaces of
It starts to get like, wait, hold on, are we in Star Wars?
Yeah.
With those cheesy transitions.
Yeah, are we in like a weird
we love Star
avant-garde
Wars,
dream sequence?
Yeah.
Very strange.
I mean, unless that's what you're after, unless that's the, that's your standout effect.
Exactly. Which, hey, more power to you. Okay, so with the rest of these tracks, I'm going to pretty much do the same thing. And it's a lot of just like copying and pasting, reinventing the wheel. So I'm literally just going to, or not reinventing the wheel, but letting the wheel be a wheel and copy paste. So I'm going to take the parametric equalizer. I just literally click and drag, and then that moves that effect over. And I'm going to do it one more time. So that way now all of my 3 main audio tracks for dialogue anyway have all of these features built into them. And then I'm going to do like a sound check just to make sure that the levels don't need to be adjusted any further. So let's see.
I don't know. We can't walk around talking about I am my ancestors' wildest dream and be pulling like 60 hours a week and not taking care of ourselves and not enjoying the freedom that we have to not be judged by our output.
Cool. So one thing about Victor's microphone was that he was using just like an audio headset with like one of those little microphones built in. So there's only so much. Yeah. There's only really so much we can do to kind of like mess with that, enhance that, make it better. It's really more just about like balancing it as much as you can and then going from there. And that kind of comes back to what I was talking about of like when you're recording, try to record the cleanest, nicest track you possibly can, so that way you get more freedom to mess around with it in post. One thing about audio is you can't add data and fix something that's there. It has to already be there to be manipulated. It's not like, say, with illustrations where I forget, actually you would know this, like vectors where you can blow them up infinitely and it never pixelates,
Right.
That sort of stuff. Audio is not like that.
It makes me think about photography actually as a similar medium, because you want that raw file, you want all of that information so you can then manipulate it. And it's almost like setting up your foundation. So in the same, I guess, concept, we're approaching audio in the same way. We want a foundation, something clean to start with. So then we can build up on that and just highlight it and balance it and make it better.
Exactly. And that's why I keep coming back to the 32-bit float, because it's like really cool.
So that's the main takeaway today, if all else. Okay, gotcha.
Record everything you do in 32-bit float, everything. Okay, so now we are going to move into, that's more or less it for finalizing an episode from an audio perspective for the video podcast. I do go through and do a little bit, a quick color pass and things like that. But, this isn't something epically cinematic per se. So I don't spend too much time on that. But I can, if y'all feel it's relevant, just let me know.
I kind of had a question for you. I know you're approaching each audio and they're all voiceovers. I mean, they're all just people speaking, not soundtracks, not sound effects. But do you approach maybe a certain track differently, because not only the person has like a different audio, but maybe they have a different voice volume or tonality that maybe you want to highlight. Like I often find myself like, I have a different environment and maybe I sound a little bit more pitchy that day for whatever reason. So I'm like, wait, that doesn't sound like my voice. It sounds a little bit too high. So then I'll lower it. Or if I'm trying to balance, can't say that word, balance two people who are speaking, oftentimes I notice that maybe one of us sounds like too pitchy. And then so I'll lower it a little bit and help that person from those like elements of nerves that can kick in right at the start. Yeah.
So for something like that, I will sometimes go back into things like the parametric equalizer. Generally, if I'm recording two people sitting, each person has their own microphone that is not facing, and the microphones are not facing each other. So that way I'm more or less getting clean audio from that one person, clean audio from the other person, so I can manipulate both after the fact later. But that's when I go into the parametric equalizer, because in here you can start to bring out people's midtones in their voice a little bit more. So like something I will do is like this, the number 3 right here. I'll mess with this one a little bit if I feel like I sound a little too tinny that day. Something else I'll do is, depending on how deep that person's voice is, I might scoot the high pass filter down a little bit, so that way it's not like, say, a new version of a new episode of the podcast is going to feature Rome Green. He's part of Dormtainment on YouTube. He has a deep baritone voice.
Cool.
Like,
it's so funny to like identify the different voices.
Yeah, he's giving like Luther Vandross, he's giving those like 60s, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that 60s radio.
Yes.
Welcome to this podcast.
Exactly. And so for him, just to make sure I'm not losing some of that, I might scoot this down a little more. And then just to make sure he stays nice and full, I might bring this up and like to the center. And but then make sure that he's not too bassy. I might like lift this up or pull it down. So you can start to manipulate it based on whose voice and like the characteristics of their voice.
Yeah.
For sure.
Interestingly enough, Reverb Mike mentioned something about visuals, and I was very curious about like how maybe an unlearned ear could guide themselves by the visuals, like the graph that you were just showing, as opposed to being like, oh well, I got to train my ear for like months on end until I catch on. Yeah, how would that kind of come into play in Premiere?
I think so. The thing I always tell people is the data doesn't lie. And it's the same thing that goes with like color correcting and color grading as well. You can look at the frame and see what you see there. But until you see the graph of like the data representation of something, that's what you can actually believe to be true. So for example, when I play my audio, and I just remember watching the episode of them together, I'm looking at my VU meters, my dB, and I'm making sure that it's not peaking. Whether my audio on my computer is turned up high or not is irrelevant. The data is showing me where it hits. And so I always tell people the data is the most important thing.
Right.
Yeah, because you can, I have friends that are technically hard of hearing, and they do video podcasts, they do all sorts of things, and they trust the data. So,
wow, that's so interesting. So it's like almost suitable for all sorts of people that have like even entry level or advanced, or folks who don't have to depend on the auditory element, which is ironic because it's audio. But yeah, having those visuals, I think, have helped me navigate it a little bit easier too, because that's what I'm accustomed to and everything else. Yeah, so that makes sense.
And it's the same thing for color. Like if we go into, let's see if I can pop over real quick, because I forgot, this like stream is, we just chilling. So we have time to like do all sorts of stuff in the stream. But like say we're going into the color workspace and I pull up the Lumetri Scopes. Let's see if they'll play well with me for a second. Oh my gosh. There they go. So this is
that came
the
to mind.
data. Yeah, this is the data. This is the data of the image and the color that we see. Now, within there, you can decide to make all sort of creative decisions, color grading versus color correcting. But at the end of the day, you can know that if you bump this too high, I mean, it looks terrible. And also the data is letting you know that we have
It's
hit
freaking out.
100. Yeah.
Essentially.
We have blown out the shot and the pixels
Looks like
are
a
gone.
rogue wave.
And so, yeah, I always tell people, like, as long as you can look at the data and see, then there you go.
Right.
Everything past that is art.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly what came to mind when I was referring to assimilating anything visual that I usually edit in Premiere is often graphs and can be intimidating at first, of course. But nevertheless, like the approach is just looking at that graph because the data is going to give you that resolve of like, oh, I am doing the right thing.
Exactly.
Even if my screen is not like calibrated and I can't really tell. Yeah, it's a great way to do that.
Yeah.
I had another question about like, I know when it comes to podcasts, oftentimes folks add sound effects or intros musics like like at the very beginning, almost like a reels, so to speak, I guess. Yeah. How do you balance the voice versus soundtracks? You mentioned there's sort of a certain I guess volume level that you want for voices. Like, how do you balance that for soundtracks?
Yeah, so the Trying to Be Somebody video podcast does have a theme song that was actually designed by who produced it? Let me be like, check these people out.
Yeah.
It was produced by Jay Ruckers and written and performed by Belief in Music, who's a friend of mine. He's also a fellow YouTuber and rapper, actually, based out of
Nice.
Santa Monica. No, not Santa Monica.
Collaborations all around.
Yes, San Diego. And so I'll go ahead and play a little bit of it. It might be a little loud. Actually, not too bad. Okay. Everybody needs somebody. Make a way for you. I'm just trying to be somebody. So make a way, make a way, make a way. So that's the theme song. And I usually, as you can see down here, here it is at the bottom. I usually time it to where once we kind of hit the main chorus of the song, it times up with the animation that I have for the opening. So I usually like to tee it up to start, and I'll just solo it so you can see. I'm just trying to be somebody. So make a way, make a way, make a way. Yeah. So the thing I like to focus on when doing audio is I usually, if it's music, I usually like to have it be somewhere in the, and this is like, again, general rule of thumb. I usually like to have my background music, if it is going under people talking, and people talking is the important thing to hear, and the background music is just that ambiance, I like to have it balance out somewhere in between -24 and -30 dB. And I find that that generally is a good rule of thumb, regardless of, because you're also trying to think about all the different ways people will hear / watch your video. So some people will have on amazing, AirPod Max, $500 Bose, blah, blah, blahs, right? And then some people will just be listening on, the little buds that you pop into your phone and keep stepping. So
yeah,
I find that if my audio, my background music is anywhere between -24 and -30 and kind of like hitting right at the peak at 24, then that tends to be okay. And it's not distracting people, but they also can still hear it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And in your process, did you like test that yourself? You were like, oh, let me listen to it on these fancy headphones and also on just regular headphones.
Exactly. Yes. Earlier on in my career, when I was first starting to get into podcasting and creating YouTube videos as well in general, vlogs, etc., my final pass with a lot of things is listening to it on my MacBook with nothing plugged in. So just whatever the MacBook speakers give me. I'll cast it to my TV. I'll have the video on unlisted and cast it to my TV and hear how it sounds from a TV. I'll hear how it sounds from headphones, all different types of headphones. There's like no hard and fast thing. It's all about just testing it on different machines and seeing what it sounds like.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then, this is actually a good thing to remember. Let's go back to the audio panel. Another thing I really like to mess with here in Premiere that I really appreciate, and I have it on here as well, is the balanced background music and the essential sound panel. It's like a snazzy, quick, easy way. So again, for the people here where maybe audio isn't, your first love, if you will, let's go ahead and just like get everything off of this, and I'll show you.
That's so true, though. I recognize it is the first love for some people. I went to school with those folks. They were all about audio. Yeah. And I befriended them too, because I was like intrigued. Wow. So you're into audio production. That's so interesting.
Yeah. I feel like audio folks, we're as someone who's like a recovering audio person, we're a fun motley bunch. I can definitely say for sure.
You nerd out on the 32 bit?
32-bit float.
Bit float.
If you take nothing else from the stream, 32-bit float. All right. So I've taken off everything from the music. So it's going to be probably pretty loud. I don't want to blast off it.
That's our instant.
So that's how loud it just is.
And you can see it visually too. It's
exactly. So the first thing I usually do with music is I come into that essential sound panel. And remember, we're just in the sound workspace or the audio workspace right now of Premiere, which I like it. It's a pretty decent workspace if you're going to be doing audio stuff. It kind of brings up the things.
It's the essentials, essentially.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. I used to think it was everything, but it says it in the name.
Yeah, exactly. And so with the music highlighted, usually what I do is I come to the presets and then I do balanced background music. And you'll notice, I did that, and my gain, the waveform of my track, you saw how much it just like dropped like immediately. So now let's play it.
By our output. Like, that's our ancestors' wildest dream.
So so now let's also solo it so we can actually see where it's hitting. So now it's hitting right around negative 18 dB, which again, from my personal preference, I think is still a little too loud. But I like having that preset built in already, because it's like, first step, boom, back, just drop it all, I don't have to think about it. And now I can add my keyframes in from this already reduced audio level, which I really like. I don't have to go through and be like, okay, this part have it all the way down at like something crazy and this part here and so on and so forth.
Right.
It's just automatically starting at a good level. And then from there, I bump it back up for that section and bring this section down. And I usually bring it down to like around there, like negative 10. I'm just trying to be somebody. And then for there, I might bring it up a little. Yeah, it is catchy. I might bring it up a little bit. Nah, that's too high. And then I start kind of playing around, like, where do I want this, I'm just trying to be somebody. But that's generally how I approach adding background music to a podcast, for sure. And then what I do is like I just kind of let it slowly fade out when I start doing my intro and talking and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I noticed that you did that solo click. I always wonder what that was. So instead of muting everything else and then letting this play, you're like, I'm just going to solo this, which is, it isolates it essentially.
Exactly. So yeah, it'll just play whatever track is soloed.
The little tricks of the trade.
Exactly. And then, the M is to mute a track completely. So for sure.
Yeah, I use that one all the time.
Yeah, I think that one's a bit more intuitive. I think the S, if you're new to Premiere, you're kind of like, what does that do?
Yeah.
The other thing that Premiere does that I don't usually use, but it is pretty neat, is you can literally record to a track a voiceover. I don't usually use it, and you can use a mic that you have plugged into your computer and it'll recognize it, etc. I don't usually use it because, again, since I have video with my audio, usually it's just not something I need. But I also know some podcasters who they get in, edit things they want, and then hit that and record their little well-written intro, you know what I mean? and go that way too.
Yeah, I definitely have used it as a voiceover for short reels and things like that, just to kind of just have the video play and then do the voiceover, which I found it really helpful to just do things faster. But interestingly enough, like the audio that comes in won't sound like a podcast straight off the bat, right? So I would be curious, like you still have to go and apply your some techniques, some presets to be able to make it sound warm and compressed and all of those elements that make podcasts sound so good.
Yes, right? Definitely. Again, like I just feel like the parametric equalizer is always just a great place to start for people, especially if you don't know anything. Vocal enhancer is always gonna just get a lot of work done for you without knowing the science of audio. And then of course also, trying to record into Premiere with the best microphone you can. So like if I was doing this, my computer's doing so much right now, I don't want to try it because it might freak it out. But usually I would use this microphone that it's, connected to my computer. To record the best audio I can without hearing too much of my computer in the background, etc.
Have you ever dove into the settings because this makes me really curious, on Essential Sound, there is a preset that is a podcast. Yes. So I'm like curious, did they use the equalizer? Did they use, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you're doing it independently, but any preset was preset by someone else. They found some settings that worked. So I would be curious, like, have you kind of dug into that investigation mode?
No, yeah. So I just took all the audio effects. Let's take the hard limiter off too. Of this, we're just working in this front section here again. So in the past, this is going to be a little bit of sorry, Premiere. In the past, I did like the dialogue presets that were in here for cleaning up audio and doing that podcast sound. But then there was an update and it kind of went a little rogue. And I was like, I don't know if I like this anymore. So I actually haven't touched it. So let's see, because I don't know. I haven't touched it since I think like 4 updates ago. So
yeah, sometimes I'm surprised, like it doesn't quite make it feel like a podcast. And obviously that kind of just goes back to, if your audio isn't a good foundation, then it's not going to just do magic out of nowhere.
Exactly. And I think that's also the struggle as well, is like, if you didn't record it that great to begin with, no, AI can only do so much, and audio and engineer can only do so much.
Yeah.
So,
If you're not in a closet, then sorry, we can't help. I'm just kidding. No, there's possible ways to record audio without a closet. It always sounds good.
Yeah, it does. So I've highlighted that dialogue in yellow, and I'm just going to come to the preset here, and let's see. So clean up noisy dialogue. I had messed with that one before for vlogs in the past, and it actually usually did work pretty well, but let's try podcast voice and just, see what it does to me. Okay. So you see how my waveform like got boosted, which scares me slightly, but let's see. Let's see what we got, because I haven't done this in quite some time, and we've got time. Endeavoring to persevere as always, and welcome. And then let's mute the music so we can just pay attention to me. Endeavoring to persevere as always, and welcome back to another episode of the Trying to Be Somebody video podcast. So a few things I like that it did. You notice it did get me all the way up to -3, peaking right around -3 dB, which is interesting. I feel like I sound a little hot, personally.
It really boosted that clarity almost too much.
Almost. And so we can go in and play with this a little more. So the podcast preset, that's what it's on right now. It's on podcast voice, but we can probably bring the amount of that down. Let's see.
Right, more subtlety.
As always, and welcome back to another episode of the Trying to Be Somebody video. Yeah, that's sounding better. Also, this is new. I hadn't seen this before. It used to do the enhanced speech, and it used to say female voice versus male voice, which I always found funny because my voice is quite low for a female voice.
Same for me, yeah.
So I would actually always usually put it on the male voice when I would use this feature.
To sound more true to your voice. Yeah.
Yeah, but I see now they've kind of gender neutralized it, which I really like.
Appreciate it.
High tone versus
Applause.
low tone. Thank you, Premiere.
Thank you.
Yeah, but let's just take it off altogether and see what that does. Revere as always, and welcome back to another episode of the Trying to Be Somebody video podcast. That softened me up overall and took away some of that like pinchy kind of super duper clarity that we were getting. That I personally don't like. Okay, that actually wasn't too bad.
That sounds much better. I mean, not better than before, but like better from default.
Yeah. Okay, Premiere, I see you. Y'all fixing stuff.
It's worth revisiting the updates, you know?
It is.
Oftentimes from here, I tend to save presets just to then apply it to each clip. But now knowing that track editing is involved, this is great. This is already cutting that workflow. But nevertheless, it's kind of useful to have a sort of preset that you know works for a certain mic. That's usually how I negotiate those presets. I'm like, okay, let's divide and conquer for the next time that I have to record in that one mic.
Also, remember that, especially with the Essential Sound panel, you can do everything I just did to multiple clips at a time as well. So in a way, it's kind of like doing the same thing as before. Like you can just highlight everything, go into here, set what you want. I think I turned that off for everything and call it a day.
Yeah, it also, I can see it does involve the EQ.
It does. Yeah. And then I think, so there's, again, to your point, there's different like presets in here where you can mess around with things. So like say, I want to sound like I'm coming over an intercom, you see what it does. And then where we interview mostly BIPOC artists with the goal of helping you.
I know, I love those. They're kind of cool. Or you sound like you're talking on the phone.
Yeah, here we go. I'm Hallease, endeavoring to persevere as always, and welcome back to another episode of the Trying to Be Somebody video podcast, where we interview. Yeah. So there's definitely stuff you can play around with here to sort of add like practical sound editing and sound effects to your stuff if you're trying to get a certain look and feel.
You become like almost curious about all the sounds that are around you after this. It's like, wow, do I really like, oh, when I talk to someone on the phone, it does sound like that. It sounds a little pitchy. It sounds a little bit muffled, almost underwater. How can I replicate that? And I think that's when you start to gain that control of like, well, maybe I can create my own effects.
Exactly. And there's also just like so much you can play with. So if you go up to the effects tab, here at the top, there's also a whole bunch of audio effects in here that you can do all sorts of things with, delays and filters and all sorts of crazy reverbs. I mean, you can really go to town if you want.
And those are
Premiere.
Are they similar? I was just going to say, are they similar to Audition? I imagine like when I think about Audition, I often think it's this, but more complex.
Yes.
That'd be a fair.
I would say that Audition is the more complex version of all the things that are available in Premiere. The other thing about Audition that's really cool, and yeah, maybe I should have Mike on. He'd be like able to show you all sorts of crazy stuff. But Mike Russell, he's also amazing. But something that you can do in Audition is you can actually isolate like sounds in what's called a spectral frequency and then like paint them out. It's crazy some of the stuff you can do in Audition.
Yeah, there's a lot of visuals involved.
Yeah, it's really cool.
That is
not going to say it's not, because it is.
I mean, the good thing I think about them both, nevertheless, is that they work together because they're under the Creative Cloud. So you're you're not stepping way out where it starts to kind of mess with your workflow because things are not compatible or things of that nature. I think once in a while I go into Audition just to remove noise. Because it's so good at that. And I'm like, okay, cool. Click save. And it's a link that's completely connected and it just updates it into my timeline, which is perfect. Swift. Mm-hmm.
It is it is really neat to use Audition just to take a piece of audio really quickly into there, delete whatever noises or sounds are happening, and then literally just like close Audition and see it update in Premiere like simultaneously. It's like magic,
Yeah, that is
technological
super
magic.
cool. Have you ever used that remix tool on the soundtrack to make it sort of fade out easier, or just like blend them together? Like if your song is not long enough, things of that nature.
So I actually use the remix tool a lot.
A lot. Okay, cool.
Yeah, just not really for the
Hit the
video
jackpot.
podcast. Yeah, but not really for the video podcast because everything is like so specific
like
and the song is
YouTube.
just, yeah, the song is just there to help. But with other things, oh yeah, the remix feature is amazeballs. And I'm not sure, I don't think this project has like anything else in it where I could show you what it is. I don't think so.
Your
Oh,
project
wait.
is so neat, though. Like,
let me see here. Yeah, okay. So for
Okay.
example, this is a video that went straight to my Patreon called Monday Motivation. So I just like check in with patrons to do stuff or just like what I
love
have going
that.
on.
Yeah.
And let's go up to the project here and pick a song. We're like moving completely away from the podcast, but whatever. It's alive. We've got time. All right.
Yeah. I think we have a through line audio.
Yeah. Nice. That's like a little bop. It's a little jam.
Yeah. Doesn't it shock you how like the wavelengths are just like so uniform?
A little bit.
And I'm just so used to a voiceover where everything's just shifting constantly.
Yeah. So let's take this nifty song and we notice that, okay, yeah, it doesn't go over the span of the entire video. In the olden days, when I was but a wee babe, what we would have to do.
It sounds so long ago.
It felt like, I mean, it's been a while. Anyway, but what you would have to do is then like, you know, copy it and then try to be on your best, like counting on the 2s and 4s, 1s and 3s, kind of make it all line up and repeat it over. But now all you have to do is with your song highlighted, there's actually a couple ways you can do it. So I'll show multiple ways that you can use the remix tool. So there's no official shortcut to get to the remix like icon. It's just in this one at the very bottom. Like you see the other ones
tiny. Okay, got it. Yeah.
You see other ones have letters and that's the shortcut, but you see
so
remix doesn't have one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're just going to click on it. And now we have our remix tool and you see it's like a little note, right? And all I'm going to do is highlight the edge of this song. And remember before this is the edge, so I couldn't drag it out anymore. But now I just take it and just go however long I want. Let's say I want to go to there. And then it immediately just starts analyzing it, figuring out what's going on with the song, finding the beats, and then boom, makes it the length I want.
And you can see all the edges there.
Yeah, all of those little ZZs are all the places that it has trimmed and cut and repeat the song to make sure that it plays without any skipping. So let's like play a little bit of it so you can hear. I'm going to drop it down a little bit because music that's EQ'd generally is quite loud. So here we go. I mean, you would have no idea that that was a cut right there.
Yeah.
So this is a really awesome feature. Now, if you
it's a very recent feature too.
Yeah. It used to be just in Audition and then they finally switched it over to also be included in Premiere.
There you go.
But what you can also do is you can come into your essential sound, like since I went ahead and incorporated it, you still have all the like super tight controls that you can want to make potentially to a song. And it's the same thing. This is just another way to get to the remix feature is just in the essential sound panel. So say I know that I'm going to want a 30-second version of this song only, right? Then I would just come in here and type that in. And then scroll back and then hit enter and boom. Now it cuts it down and edits it to be 30 seconds and more. Yeah, it's a little over. It's always, you notice it says plus or minus 5 seconds. But yeah, it more or less cuts it down to make the song make sense in 30 seconds.
And you can still see those 2 cuts there. So it's still remixed it. to extend the original duration of it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so swift. Yeah, the old school way was definitely like sort of matching those wavelengths and then trying to see how you were true like remix pro at that point, because it was very time intensive.
Super time intensive. It was a struggle bus for sure. But yeah, that's the remix feature. Definitely.
And so you use it frequently, specifically for stuff like this, or for other reasons too?
Usually it's for vlogs and like documentaries. I'll do longer form content when I do know I want this music to go to a specific section and lead out and get us like into a transition shot into the next section. So yeah, with the podcast, it's usually just like, just have the song fade out. People get it. It's fine.
It's more focused on the actual voices as opposed to the soundtracks.
Exactly. So the next thing I was going to cover is how I prep the video podcast to create shorts, reels. I'm on TikTok, but not like that, content. And I forgot to reset this, so I would start from scratch.
Famous last words, content.
Right. So let's see. I'm going to show y'all how.
So you'll repurpose the podcast to shorts and reels.
Exactly. And right now I'm just like resetting a bit so that way we're starting from scratch. You can see how I usually start. All right.
Okay.
So usually what I do through the process of a podcast, and you'll see that with the color coding, anything that I think will make a good piece of short form content, minute or less, more or less, I'll kind of highlight it a different color. And then once an episode's more or less finalized, I'll just throw it all in a different timeline. That way, so you can see most of these are the actual color. Some of them I was like, we need some outside context. Hold on. So I brought those clips in too. But I just kind of throw them in a different timeline. Obviously, though, you don't want it to look like that, like having all these black bars and whatnot. Not that cute. So the first thing I do is I highlight everything. And then I always forget what it is for PC. Let me see if I remember. Yes. Okay. So what you do is I hit Option.
You hit Alt. Alt.
You hit Alt? Okay.
Yeah.
So I hit Option, and while I'm holding Option, I drag up or down or whatever, and it just replicates everything that I had highlighted and puts it wherever I put it. So that's a nice shortcut. Option for me, Alt for PCs. So that's the first thing I do. The second thing I do is the bottom layer. I usually, actually, let's change our workspace here so we can see. I'm going to switch it to my finalizing one. Noise. And then I'm also going to, okay, thank you. Noise. All right. So next, what I do is I highlight the bottom one and I come into the motion over here. And I usually just bring it all the way down. So all the way down like that. And then I also let it go ahead and fill up the frame. So usually somewhere like that-ish. That's pretty good. We'll go with that.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. If you want to see the edges of your frame and you're just feeling like you can't really see them, just hit the motion button and you'll see it'll create a blue box around it. So you can just like really see where your edges are, if you will. Because I find like sometimes you'll export and then be like, you'll export and then be like, crap, that like a little bit of the frame was off or, whatever.
It's like, where'd it go?
Yeah. And then with the top one, since usually people are one person speaking at a time, I just fill it to where the top one is whoever is speaking. So I just scoot it over and then keep on zooming and enhancing until it gets more or less to where I want it. So since I'm pretty sure she's speaking in the first one. Yeah.
Nice.
I would say if somebody was ever licensing my content, I would.
And there you go. That's generally how I set up turning my horizontal content into vertical content. And from there, copy paste, man. Take everything from that, highlight these, because this is one short right here. All of this is one short. And so I'm just going to hit boom, paste it. This one, likewise, top, paste it. And now it's all set up and ready to go. And then I also create a little like end card of like, go watch the episode. Here it is, you know?
Yeah. And the different locations where you can find it. I'm curious. So once you're speaking, do you just keyframe that, or do you copy and paste and sort of set it over?
Exactly. So when I'm speaking, let me find one. Here we go. So here's one where I'm speaking. And yeah, all I did was, instead of having her be the main focus, and it's not even keyframing, I literally just cut the clips to separate them, and I just scoot it to be me, and that's it. So if you play it back a little bit.
Office and be like, so and so is running a sweatshop.
Especially now that I've run. Very simple.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and it still gives some context at the bottom, which is often sort of occupied by all this text, but nevertheless, you get to like see, okay, this is an interview. I can wait along. Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing I like to do in Premiere is I usually do like to add closed captions in Premiere, just to make sure that for anyone who is hearing impaired, they can still consume the content. It depends on how you want to do it. You know, I know sometimes it might be worth it to actually wait to include the closed captions in whatever app you're using, because that might just help with pushing that content more because you're using the in-app tools. But sometimes I find that they're just so inaccurate. The captions are so inaccurate, and they're hard to they're hard to correct in app as well, like to go through and fix things. I like using Premiere's captioning feature because it makes it really easy to fix it in post before you ever export, without it being like such a huge struggle.
Yeah.
So
I think I agree with that workflow too. It's the same sort of like wrestling with the app developing and getting better at doing the things. So it's with Premiere, it's just more efficient to get used to that workflow.
Yeah. And with these, you'll notice there's already, I have the text window pulled up already. If it doesn't come up for you, just go over to here and hit text, and that'll bring it up. But you see, I already have transcripts of everything that's in this timeline because these are episodes that already went out. But what you would generally do is hit transcribe. Actually, you know what I can do? Here's what I can do. So we can play through the full kit and caboodle of how this works.
In and out points.
I am going to just create a quick new little timeline that won't have the transcription metadata.
Oh, gotcha.
From that.
Yeah. Because usually you have to ask Premiere to transcribe all of the audio. Which, you've already done because it's already been published. But yeah, that's part of the step. And then you follow it with the actual captions, which I think oftentimes people get confused. They're like, wait, I've transcribed it, done. But no.
Okay, that's what I did. I was like, what size is this timeline? I don't even know what I was doing. It's 4K. Okay, go me. All right.
Go ahead.
All right, so there you go. Yeah, okay, 4K vertical. Do that. Bada bing. Okay, and then paste. There we go. Now we're fitting. All right. So, so here we go. We had that little section real quick, and I think she's talking about net 30 versus net 90.
I would say if somebody was ever licensing.
Oh, no, she's talking about licensing. Anyway, all right. So she's a retired lawyer who's on episode 1 of the podcast. She gives some really great tea on contracts. Yeah, y'all. Don't sleep on the podcast. Anyway, transcribing, shameless plug, transcribing the sequence. So let's go ahead and just hit the transcribe button. It's going to bring up this new bounding box, and neato stuff worth mentioning. It now understands quite a few languages, which is really cool. Before it was just English. I think it didn't even do English UK when it first dropped. I think it was just American English. And now it's like, it literally understands multiple languages, which is like
so many languages. Yeah, you'll have to download it, but nevertheless.
Yeah. It's pretty neat though. And then speakers, I usually don't tell it to separate speakers or try to locate, tell me who's speaking when, just because that's more data that frankly I don't really need. If I were doing a professional closed caption for like broadcast, then it would feel relevant. That would be data I would use. But for the internet, don't really need that much specificity.
Interesting. I was always curious about that question.
Yeah.
What the benefits were.
And then we're going to have it, we want it to check the dialogue of both tracks, even though I think she's the only one talking. I don't really see anything in my waveform for this one, but I'll just tell it to do a mix. Sometimes you can, or you can always tell it to do a specific track if you just want to get a transcript of whatever's only on one track, but
Right.
tell it to do a mix. And then we're going to hit transcribe. And now it's going to send it up to the cloud. And with the power of Adobe Sensei, it is going to figure, oh, that was fast. I didn't even get to tell you the whole bit.
To do the intro.
But yeah, with the
If
power
it's magic,
of Adobe,
it's Adobe Sensei.
Yeah, basically. But with Adobe Sensei, it figures out everything she said. So let's like play through and see how accurate or inaccurate it is.
I would say if somebody was ever licensing my content, I would probably get like a colleague to look over like my work, because they always say a lawyer that has themselves for a client is a fool.
So pretty accurate, like those are captions straight up.
Yeah.
Or actually, this is the transcript. So let's say that, for example, though, maybe she says something. This actually really did get her like really loud. I don't see like many. Here's a hey. It's a capitalized hey when it probably shouldn't be capitalized. So all
punctuations usually are harder.
Yeah, I notice it does struggle a little bit with punctuation.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a capital H there. All I did was double click, and now I can edit this live and just fix that. So I always recommend to people to, if you're going to use the closed captions feature, while it's in transcript form, listen through, read it, make sure everything is looking more or less how you want it to look before you create the caption.
Yeah. This is the moment to edit, to make sure that the statements are not like run-on sentences, things like that. Yeah.
Exactly. And I do see a couple of little like run-on sentence-y things, but for now, this is fine. I think I did like 92% of the work for sure. And then from here, now let's create the closed captions. So we're just going to hit this double C, and it'll bring up the create captions, which brings up a new box. And this is when, we start to get into the things of like, if you were actually delivering captions for broadcast television where there are standards around how you caption things correctly, that's when all of these like little, these acronyms and things, that's when all these acronyms matter.
So those are standards, like industry standards.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. But for us, for the internet, subtitle default, more than enough.
The internet freestyles everything. We're wild.
Yes, we're a lawless land.
Yeah, we're lawless.
But if I tool down the preferences, you can even get a bit more granular. So you can also design your own text style. So I actually have a closed caption style that I like to use with my stuff that I've built into my Premiere project. And you can do that too if you want. I'm gonna leave it on none so we can go through and mess around with some things.
The word style reminds me of InDesign styles.
Yeah, actually, I mean, kind of the same thing. It's just like a text style.
It's formatting. Things like that.
And then you can decide maximum length of characters. So how many letters do you want per line, or characters, so it can be spaces too. And then minimum duration of in seconds. I usually up this because sometimes the words do be going a little too fast. So I up it just a little bit. And then you can decide if you want to do single line or double line. When it's something like this, vertical, I usually go single, just because. And then we're going to create our captions.
I think single looks nicer, but it feels a little less overwhelming. So it runs the risk of being faster.
Yeah. That. So right now, this is sort of the default of what captions look like in Premiere. Let me turn off our safeguards there.
I would say if somebody was ever licensing
really old school, content, if you wanted vintage, you got it.
Yes. And you'll notice now we have our captions track up top here, and that's where all of those are. So I'm just going to highlight everything, and you'll notice as soon as I do that, everything's highlighted over here. And then I'm going to go to the essential graphics, and I'm going to go to edit. And now it has turned into where we can now actually edit what our captions look like. I'm going to show y'all what my track style looks like so you can see. But you'll notice, so I go more with like a sans serif look. I think this is an
Simple to
Adobe
read.
font. Yeah, and then I think I add
Yeah,
like
you have to think about that visibility. You can't go crazy with like header fonts or anything like that because
yes.
it gets complicated.
Yeah.
Or you
and then,
can,
like,
I don't know, break the rules, lawlessness, right?
hey. Hey. But yeah, I have like a basic kind of stroke and a little bit of a shadow there just to make sure it pops out against whatever background is there. But something I will say that I need to actually adjust this caption style is I would not recommend having your text this low if you're going to put this on any sort of, vertical content, social media, because you'll know most of the stuff is always down here, like whose caption it is and all that kind of stuff for the app. So I would actually do something like that, click in the center, and then maybe drop it down to like here.
Yeah.
And that way we see
something to just keep in mind.
Yeah. And then here, let's mute. So that way, yeah, now it's kind of staying in the middle of the screen. If I wanted to be super epic, I would start to try like make it, how big can we make it without it going into 2 lines and, things like that.
Sometimes I use it to emphasize things. Nice. So I'll grab one clip and if we're talking about 30 days net and that's the main topic of what we're discussing, I'll highlight that with a different formatting. Ooh. And I notice you can start to kind of break away from the idea of what captions are supposed to be for, and then just start stepping into like, hey, this could help translate what I'm saying visually.
Exactly. Or like, to your point, even right here, like I'm making a face. You see it right there. I'm like making a face, right?
Yeah.
And so
that's the thumbnail.
Yeah. No, Siri, that's not for you.
Is there something else?
Go away, Siri.
You're not part of the stream, my friend.
Right? So maybe here's something I would add is like, Hallease shook. Like a lot of times in my captions, I will play around
on YouTube.
With. Yes. Yeah. I will play around with like using the captions to just intensify what is already visually being shown anyway. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just for fun.
It just kind of brings in that narrative, like the narrative of the person's mind almost.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, that's captioning, man. It's pretty simple. It's pretty easy. And then to finalize, one thing I will mention is if you are going to do this and create captions, when you do go to export, Command M, Control M on a PC will bring up your export window. Oh, Zoom, what are you doing over here? Go away.
It's okay.
I always forget. Hide. Help me out. Where do I do? Oh, there it is. Hide floating control.
Yeah. There.
Okay. Just make sure that when you are exporting your captions, make sure that your captions tab is active. And you'll probably want burn captions into video. That's probably more or less what you want. Because if you take it away, you see they're gone. So
got it.
Keep that in mind.
And essentially, you can also export them independently, right? And import them into each platform.
Yes. So that would be the create sidecar file, and it creates a .srt, which is, as you can see, a subtitling format card. I keep accidentally hitting the dictation button.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, but yes, and you can do that. So that way, if you say you're actually creating a YouTube video and you already captioned or you already transcribed everything and you don't want YouTube to use, maybe it's auto captioning or transcribing, which is
right. Yeah.
Yeah, you can export it out and then upload that to the YouTube video as well. So that way it'll work.
That's so awesome. Yeah, I think that's one of those things where like it's become more common now because people look at their phones, but maybe don't have the audio on all the time. And so that becomes like this easy way to still digest the information without having to be so involved in it, having to kind of make it be part of the room wherever you are. Maybe you're at work. I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so cool. A quick reminder to the chat that you can also submit yourself as a guest, just like we have Hallease here. We'll love to learn from you. So check out the chat and submit yourself or a friend so we can have them here on our live stream. And yeah, I'm so curious, Hallease, now that you've shown us all of these really cool workflows that you have for obviously different formats and different platforms, what are the main spaces or platforms that we can find you for either podcast or video or all of the above?
Yes. So I stay on the internet in a lot of different ways. It's a little hectic, but the the main way to find me is youtube.com @Hallease, at my name. That is my biggest platform, my main platform. And over there, it's all sorts of shenanigans. So yeah, tutorials, lifestyle, vlogs, plant videos. It's whatever I'm vibing. The channel is really an amalgamation. The niche is me. There's only one me.
I know. It's like we can't help but be curious about so many things. I'm here doing audio, but yeah, it's like, wait, what?
Exactly. So yeah, that's where you can find me mainly. And then I'm also on Instagram as well. @Hallease.mp4 is the Instagram handle. A little more refined or whatever over there. And then on TikTok, it's @Hallease as well. And I'm just a mess. Like it's random. So
I know this is so random. I've just sort of embraced it as like, this is a random place. I'm just going to go with that. We're so used to being so like, I don't know, structured and clean cut. So we're like, what to do here?
Yes.
Yeah. And in terms of podcasts, I listen to a lot of my podcasts on Spotify, but I'm curious, like, what are your best spaces?
Yeah. Spotify is where you can find the Trying to Be Somebody podcast. It's also on Apple Podcasts as well. And then I also have a marriage podcast on Spotify and Apple as well called the Stumblewell Podcast. Me and my husband talking about all sorts of relationship shenanigans.
Awesome. And then this podcast, where can we see it? Because I actually want to check it out.
Oh, you can see it on YouTube. It's on the channel. That's why I was like, channel's a mess.
You're like, YouTube is the place.
Yes. You can see it on YouTube. You can also technically watch it on Spotify as well, because Spotify allows for video podcasts. So you can also watch it there too.
Yeah, I think the video podcast sort of movement has been like a nice in between where you can just like, you can hear a podcast on YouTube and you can also like watch things at the same time, which has been like a new thing for me too. Like I'm so used to doing that on Spotify while I'm like driving. Sure. But now I'm getting used to like, wait, I'm going to listen to a YouTube podcast that I have on my playlist. I'm going to add yours in there.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, yes, do you feel like this completes the project? I just want to make sure I'm not cutting you off.
No, you're good. Yeah, I think we've more or less knocked it out.
Yeah, we covered a lot of things. Do you want to talk about the items that we covered just to be sure?
Sure, yeah. So we covered quite a bit now that I'm thinking back.
A lot, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, y'all. Hopefully it wasn't too overwhelming. But we covered yeah, definitely hit up the replay. But I kind of showed y'all, let's see. I started off by showing y'all all the things you can kind of do in the audio track mixer. We went extensively into the parametric equalizer and the vocal enhancer feature preset, which is really great for just doing a first pass balance of people's audio. I preached to you about the gold that is 32-bit float if your wallet allows for it. If your wallet allows for it, make that investment, please. What else did we do? Oh my goodness. Oh, we talked about the remix feature. In Premiere. What else did we do? Oh, we even went into the Essential Sound panel, messed around with that a little bit.
Podcasts.
Yes, podcast voice, which actually Premiere updated. It's not too bad anymore. Thanks, Premiere, for that.
It was awesome. Then, I'm probably going to replay this just on that basis alone. We covered a lot of things. Well, thank you, Hallease. This has been so awesome just to be here and learn a few more things about audio. Before you go, by the way, I just want to say this has been awesome to be a part of this stream with a former Adobe Creative resident. And for those of you who also are maybe new to Photoshop, check out the Kyle Webster episode, the 4th episode of how to make brushes, really cool brushes, watercolor brushes, oil brushes. So definitely check that out, and definitely check out the replay of this if you weren't able to join us live. My name is Sin Lagos, and thank you, Hallease, for being a part of this again.
Yeah, thank you for having me. See y'all later.
See ya.